Hey everyone, welcome to the CADclass podcast, where makers are made. Today we're joined by special guest Jim Belosic, founder and CEO of SendCutSend. Thanks so much for joining us, Jim.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is awesome.
What is SendCutSend? For those in our audience who don't know who you are and what you do, can you give us
You have the displeasure of not knowing.
Yeah, can you give us the elevator pitch?
Yeah. Oh, elevator pitch, man. I haven't heard that in a long time. Yes. SendCutSend is an on-demand manufacturer. So we specialize in sheet metal and plastics. We use a lot of laser cutters in order to produce parts that you dream up, and then we take them and get them to your door in a couple days. So the whole concept behind SendCutSend is send us your design. We're going to cut it out of whatever material you want, and then we're going to send it to your house. So it was developed specifically with makers in mind. It was developed with hobbyists and guys like myself. You know, I built it because I was the number one customer. And the goal of SendCutSend is to make manufacturing accessible to everybody. And, you know, we started out with kind of hobbyists and makers, and now we serve also a huge portion of the Fortune 500. So yeah, sheet metal, plastics. We're getting into CNC machining as well. And then we also have some tube products coming up too. So laser cut tube and who knows what in the future. So always something new, but basically how can we make manufacturing super easy, super accessible, affordable, and quick so that people can actually take the design that they have and then hold it in their hands in a few days.
This sounds to me exactly like the problem that every maker faces at some point. I need a product yesterday for no money, right? It needs to come instantly. I don't want to pay too much money for it. But before SendCutSend and before you got into this, have you experienced that problem where you were working on a product, you wanted to develop it, you wanted to develop an idea, you went to try to outsource your production, and then can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think my arc is similar to a lot of people listening, where I needed stuff, and so I had to make it myself. Sometimes I had like a buddy down the street that I could pay with a 6-pack of beer or something. I'm like, hey man, you work at this shop. After work, if I bring by a 6-pack, can you take 100 thou off of this piece of metal or something? Or hey, do you have some scrap? Can you make me this shape? But that's not scalable. And sometimes that buddy would leave the job, and then I'm like, oh man, I just lost my machinist, or I just lost access to all that equipment. And then there's some maker spaces or whatever, and they're always closed, or they never had what I needed, or someone was already using the other equipment there. So what I ended up doing is purchasing equipment to use in my garage, hobby level equipment, whether that's like a little CO2 laser or a handheld plasma cutter or a drill press or something like that. So you end up collecting this menagerie of weird tools that you got it on, Craigslist or whatever. Some work, some don't. But what I realized is the tools that I did have, they didn't spend a lot of time running. They spent a lot of time collecting dust. They were ultra critical for that like 30 minutes that I used it that Saturday, but then it would just sit there and not be used. So I started having, a lot of money sitting around in the shop and then taking up a lot of space. And I figured, God, is there a way to like keep all this stuff running, and maybe I could make a little money to reinvest in better equipment if I let other people use it. So the first thing that I did, I really wanted a CNC plasma table. I wanted a big, a 4-foot by 8-foot CNC plasma so that I could really level up my ability to cut metal. I've been a car guy forever. And as I started working on, stranger and stranger car projects, I needed parts that didn't exist. So I could cut them out with like a handheld plasma, or sometimes I could cut it out on a bandsaw. But I was like, man, if I had this 4-foot by 8-foot CNC plasma, that would be amazing. I know I'm only going to use it like 1 hour a week, so I wonder if I can sell the other like 30 hours. And then that allows me to get this equipment for free. And I can convince my wife, like, hey, I'm going to spend 30 grand on this thing, but it's going to pay for itself, I promise you, right? So we've had that conversation many times where I just say, it's going to print money, honey. And she's like, okay, right. So the CNC plasma was kind of the first glimmer of SendCutSend. Didn't work at all. The whole concept exploded, because if you've ever used CNC plasma, you know that the quality that comes off of that table is not as good as you imagined. There's there's dross, there's burr, there's inaccuracy. Holes are not holes, they're weird ovals, and there's all kinds of issues. So I was like, oh crap, this isn't going to work the way that I thought. We did let a couple people use it, buddies or whatever, but I definitely was not making any money on it. I was losing money because I was always the guy buying the material and the consumables, and it was taking up a huge amount of space in my shop. So that's kind of when I leveled up, and I was like, okay, I think what we need is a laser. But the laser that I wanted was $600,000. So then I had to go to my wife again and be like, okay, I promise you, okay, this time I swear it's gonna pay for itself, babe. All we got to do is just get enough customers to make the payment, and we're good to go.
Yeah, just magic. It'll magically. This is a magic money machine. Can't you see?
Yeah,
There have to
to
be
know
wives.
those string of words.
Yeah, there have to be wives listening and going, "Oh no, not another one of these." With the husband in the garage that's got $100,000, $200,000, $500,000, $10 million in tools. They're like, "No, it doesn't work."
I just need one more toy. That's what I need.
Yeah, just this one. And yeah, I still do it. Like I just did it yesterday. I was like, hey, there's this $400,000 robot that I really want to buy. I promise it'll print money. So yeah, we still do it to this day. But yeah, that was the inspiration is I needed access to equipment, and I could buy some kind of hobby grade stuff myself, but I felt really weird about owning this stuff when it was collecting dust. And some pieces of equipment, it would collect so much dust that I forgot how to use it, the next spring when I rolled it out, or a few other times I would go to use the piece of equipment. I had this horizontal bandsaw for cutting metal, and I put it in the back of my garage, and then of course a bunch of other stuff in front of it. And so I needed it, but it was such a pain in the ass to roll out of the garage that I drove over to my buddy's house because he had one. And so I was like, I own the equipment and I'm not even using it. This has got to be a problem for everybody else too. Maybe I can just make this equipment accessible, and then people don't have to own all this stuff, and they can just use my stuff, and it'll be a hell of a lot easier for everyone.
The accessibility is interesting because that's how a lot of makerspaces get their start, right? They go, oh, well, I'll just rent this equipment out and I'll make it accessible to everybody, and they'll come in, they'll use this equipment, we'll train them, and then we'll have some magically trained people who never break anything and never cause any
Definitely
problems at all. And they're willing to spend all of their money to rent this equipment, right? So, but you seem to have gotten the next evolution, which is maybe it makes financial sense for us to bring the equipment in-house, have trained professionals use it, and outsource the actual part development as opposed to doing that rental model. So what was the transition into that thinking?
Yeah, I had actually thought about having a clubhouse, basically, where I was like, okay, if I can get like 6 to 10 buddies and we all pay in, a couple $100 a month, we could have this clubhouse, this shop, and we could all share equipment and whatever. And then you think about it for a little while and you're like, oh, wait, these same buddies that I've known forever, they still owe me money, even when we don't have a clubhouse. Or, old Johnny over there, he's reckless with shit and he's going to destroy the bandsaw. Or, this other guy, he has all these great ideas, but doesn't actually want to get his hands dirty. So I'm going to be the one doing everything. I was like, I'm not going to do that makerspace model or the clubhouse model. The other thing that I realized is if we had really good equipment run by really good people, the huge unlock was actually the material savings. Because when, you can buy the equipment and it's kind of a known price. The unknown is all the material and then the scrap and consumables and all that stuff. So as a guy in his garage, as a maker, if you need a 2 foot by 2 foot piece of metal to cut something out of, what do? You go to Online Metals or something, or you go to Home Depot and hope that they have some kind of crappy piece of tin that you can cut up. And it's really expensive. When I started running the math, I was like, oh, wait a second. I could provide finished parts for less than you could buy the raw material because I can buy it at scale. I can buy it at, the ton quantity, not the pound quantity. That really made my math look attractive. So that's what we pursued. I was like, okay, and that's actually a great way to sell this service is just upload your design. I'm going to deal with all the consumables. I'm going to deal with all the maintenance and lubrication. I'm going to deal with the electricity bills that are insane. But I'm also going to buy, thousands of tons of material. I'm going to be really efficient on how we utilize that material. And it's going to allow us to take, pennies worth of material and sell it for dollars, but it's still, 10 times less than you could do it yourself. So that was the huge unlock. I'm like, okay, I think the model is going to start to work. And then I don't have like all these crazy people in my, clubhouse or my makerspace breaking all my equipment all the time. So our staff does still break stuff. So do I. Usually, like, I'm not allowed on the press breaks anymore because every time I touch one of those, I get it to alarm out. So that still happens, but at least it's our problem versus the customer's problem. And it's working out really well so far.
I think that's one of the big things that really kind of surprised me. So both Josh and I, just to touch on the makerspace, Josh and I both met because we were both teachers at one of the largest makerspaces in North America. So we know the foibles that comes with running a makerspace and that whole environment and things getting broken. There we go. And just going through all of the kind of characters that run through the makerspace and hearing SendCutSend over the years and raving. I don't think we ever heard a single bad word about, ever. Coming into it, I still approached it with, okay, it's not being manufactured overseas. It's within the country, but it's still going to be expensive. It's a custom part. It's a one of one. It's still going to be absurd. Running through just like a single part that I had, running through your online calculator, and I was absolutely dumbfounded at how inexpensive it was. And I think that, to me, was one of the largest keys that kind of gave me this kind of confidence. Oh my gosh, these large projects that I have in mind are actually completely doable. It's no longer the fantasy that I've had. Oh, I've been meaning to make that. It's been on the back burner for years. It's now absolutely doable. So I think one of the secret sources from this is like the personal confidence that I got as a consumer of your company it's just unbelievable.
Yeah. The people who understand our prices the best are definitely makers and hobbyists. And it's because they have suffered. They have bought a piece of equipment and they're like trying to make it work. And then they didn't realize that the saw blades were going to be $86 a piece and they're going through 2 a day, or something like that. They've tried to cut something out by hand and they've been disappointed with the quality, or they've tried to source raw material and they've seen how expensive it is, or they've walked into a raw material supplier like PDM or something and got shown the door and been like, get out. I've done that. I went in there. We had this place in town that is a steel service center, and I was making a firewall for a car. And so I needed like a 2 foot by 4 foot just chunk of metal. And I didn't care what it was. I was like, I need metal. And I walk in there. I'm like, hey, do you guys have any scrap, that I can just buy? He's like, we don't have scrap. It's called drop. And I was like, okay, can I buy drop? And he's like, well, you need to set up a corporate account. And he's like, what's your EIN? I was like, oh my God. So they were like hostile to me. And I wish I could have just given the guy $100 bill and just been like, can you just like slip this into my car, please? So yeah, the makers and the hobbyists, when they see our pricing, they're like, oh my God, that's super easy. Let me just do that. On the other side of the spectrum, we have our massive like OEM manufacturer customers who can walk in to any manufacturer, in their area, and people will bow down and kiss their shoes, because they're like, oh, please give me your money. We want this job. And they're really cutthroat on pricing. The margins are very, very slim in sheet metal when you're producing, thousands and thousands of units. So those guys are a huge challenge for us because they're like, oh, well, I can get this done by, so-and-so down the street for, 8 cents less. I'm like, okay, like, I guess we can try, but is it as convenient as us? Is the quality going to be as good? Are you going to get it in 3 days? And they're like, no, it's 8 weeks out. And I have to sign all these contracts. I'm like, okay, well, that's why we're a little bit different. So we have this huge customer spectrum now that keeps us on our toes. We have to be price sensitive across the board. And I think it's been like a trial by fire since day one. And now we're almost 7 years into it and we're still learning, but we're getting a hell of a lot better.
I would like to add one additional difficulty that I don't think you touched on, and that is moving this material around. moving these metals around is such a barrier. I can't tell you how many times I've had a large 5x10 sheet and gone, what am I going to do with this thing? I now need to get a forklift and 2 people, and it's also extremely dangerous. I mean, this is another side of it too that people don't touch on, is like moving this stuff around is not easy and not all that safe. You have to put extra precautions in place. And so the idea of getting a full-size sheet of material and cutting a single sheet of stuff out of it just for moving material is also a horrible thought. I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to do that. Like, don't put this sheet metal in front of me. I don't want it. So
no, it's
someone who's had a sheet of plywood on the top of their roof driving break and fly off into traffic, I can attest moving big sheets is scary as hell.
Yeah, it's material handling is a huge part of it. So even if you're only ordering, 2 foot by 2 foot pieces or something like that from Online Metals or whatever, the issue that you run into is you're like, okay, I got this sheet, I can get my part out of it. What happens if you blow that part? What happens if the plasma cutter loses cut, or what happens if you start cutting on the wrong side or something, or whatever? You're like, oh crap, I only had one of those. Now I need to order another one, and now I'm into this 8 times my cost. What the heck is going on? So there's the handling, there's the whoopsie factor, and then there's, like you said, you touched on like the safety side. One common thing that we hear is they'll write in and they'll say, hey man, I had a CNC plasma table and I sold it because I can just, first of all, I can get parts from you guys for less than I can get the raw material. But also I don't have all these sharp, crazy scraps of metal laying around in my garage. And then I don't have all the smoke. People don't realize that, you're going to have crazy amounts of smoke and smell and all this other stuff when you're cutting metals, and especially plastics. Or if you're CNC machining, what are you doing with all the chips? My buddy has a CNC in his garage, and one corner of his shop is just black trash bags just full of chips. I'm like, what are you going to do with these? He's like, I don't know. They're not even worth it to take anywhere. No one wants it. So at scale, you can handle all that stuff, but it's really hard when you're in your garage. So I think we've alleviated some of those problems for a lot of people.
Most of those problems. Yeah. The safety, the health hazard. I didn't even think about the health hazard. I know that we worked in this shop for years, and metal dust is just horrible. You do not want to breathe that stuff in. And also working with metal, I feel like it's sharp, it's hot, it's dirty in all senses of the word, because you need to often protect it with some oils so that it doesn't oxidize, especially with the steels that aren't stainless, right? And other coatings as well. And so you're just dealing with this. I don't want to deal with it. I'd much rather have the part.
Just to add on to that, of what I've felt in some of the cultures within like welding shops and machine shops, if you come in there with a respirator, you're kind of like, what are you doing? And you're like, I'm trying not to breathe in metal dust. Like, take a look at my filters after a week of being here. They are jet black, dude. You all need to be wearing respirators. And the fact that, like, we don't have to do that, and I'm sure you guys have huge air regulators and dust regulators that you can just, like, avoid that is just, it's huge. It's crazy.
People ask me, oh, hey, man, how much metal do you go through? Or what's your electricity bill? Or, what are all these, like, weird metrics, around the business? Like, what's a really interesting metric? And I'm like, oh, it's actually the stuff you don't think about. It's how much liquid nitrogen we use. It's how much air we pump out of the building. It's the fact that you couldn't get into the building because we were sucking air out so hard that it like locked the doors shut. And we're like, oh crap. So we have to do, what's called makeup air. So that the building is almost like open to atmosphere because we're pulling in so much fresh air to exhaust it through the dust collection systems. I don't know how many 100,000 CFMs we're pumping out, but it's a lot. And then, one of our rules is to have a really nice working environment. So one of my desks is out on the floor. And when I work, I want it to be heated and I want it to be air conditioned and I don't want it too noisy. And I want good lighting and I want good music and I want good food and all this other stuff. So we have to support all that. So all this air that we're pumping out, like we just air conditioned it and then we're shoving it out to atmosphere via the dust collectors. It's this crazy challenge, but those are the kind of fun things that I like to think about. it's not how many lasers can you fit in the building. It's like, when are we going to run out of bathrooms? When are we going to run out of parking? There's weird stuff like that we have to think about all the time.
That's great. I just want to have a quick question that one of our community members led in. So we have got thousands of people going through our CADclass courses, and within our Discord community, we have people from all over the planet. We think at least one person from every country, which is something we're really stoked about. But we also have people from every single age limit as well. We've got guys who are, I think 92 is the oldest that we've seen, that still have that kind of maker attitude of, I still want to learn. And it's like, dude, if I can have that attitude at that age, I'll be dying happy. One of our youngest makers, one of our youngest entrepreneurs, is a chap that goes by the name Printed by John, who is 16 turning 17, who has gotten so good at 3D modeling and so good at marketing his own prints and his own designs. He's effectively funded his entire 3D printing company, literally. He's got a whole row of incredibly impressive 3D printers, hundreds of spools of filament that are all completely paid for by his own design. He hasn't put a penny in, as far as I know. And he had a question that he wanted to ask you, specifically from the young entrepreneur perspective. Was there a single spark for inspiration for starting SendCutSend and its operations, or a single annoyance in the inverse, positive or negative, that kind of threw your hands down the table and go, I'm done, I need to fix this?
Yes, there's kind of two sides to that, or two answers to that question. My entrepreneurship spark started when I was very, very young. I literally had lemonade stands, and I had a lawn mowing route, and I would do odd jobs or whatever. So I always wanted money because I always had some sort of hobby or project that I was working on. So I ran lemonade stands so that I could buy Legos. I did my lawn mowing route, and that was solely to buy RC cars. And I had the best RC cars, and I was, all my other little, 12-year-old friends, they had maybe like the stock shocks or whatever, but I had the aftermarket shocks on my RC car or whatever, because I was mowing lawns. So I always had this drive to make money so that I could spend it on something that I wanted. And then with SendCutSend specifically, it was, I needed something that didn't exist, and I thought that I could just talk to the right people and make it happen. And that wasn't true. I was like, hey, I need this part that I've designed, and it seems like you could make it for me. Please make it. And they're like, no, I'll make you 1,000, or I'll make you one, but it's going to be super expensive and you're going to have to wait 8 weeks. And I was like, this is stupid. This doesn't make any sense. And by that time, my background in software had my brain kind of turning, where I was like, well, it sounds like these guys are limited based on the programming that they do, or on the scheduling, or on the nesting and the scrap utilization. And I bet there's some software that I can write, in order to make these shops more efficient. So then they could cut my parts. So as a software guy, I was like, oh, I think we'll write some software. Maybe we can license it to these shops, and it'll make manufacturing more efficient and whatever. But then we quickly realized that a lot of these shops that weren't running efficient, they had no interest in modernizing. They're like, well, if I use your software, like, how am I going to fax this to my customer? And I was like, oh God, no, you're not. You're going to use email. And they're like, okay, well, my email address is, Jake and Tammy at Hotmail. I was like, oh God, it's not even the name of your company. It was a realization that I was like, okay, if I want this done, if I really want manufacturing streamlined for guys like me, I'm going to have to do it myself. So going back to like the entrepreneurial side, the best businesses that you can start are ones that solve a very selfish need. If you don't exercise a lot, but you have some fitness app idea, it ain't going to work. You have to live and breathe the pain, and then you can start the business on it, and then you'll be successful. But if you just have an app idea or a theory or something, but you're not customer number one, it's not going to work.
I just feel so emphatically like that's true. I've experienced that myself, and having tried to started a number of businesses. All of the businesses that I've started that didn't come from a passion, a deep-seated problem, but instead were focused more on, I could probably make a quick buck over here and do this thing, went away. And At some point, I didn't end up enjoying them. and I didn't do it. And so I could not agree with you more. Now, can I drill down? Do you remember what that part was? Do you remember the first part? What was it?
Yeah. So I was building a steam-powered car from scratch, just on the weekends, as one does, you know.
That's so rad.
I'd always been fascinated by steam power. And so, you know, like I said earlier, I've always been a car guy. So I was like, I wonder if I can buy like an old steam-powered car, like a Doble or a White or something like that. No, you can't. They're hundreds of thousands of dollars. And if they're not hundreds of thousands of dollars, you don't want them because they're a freaking bomb. They have to be fed and watered and maintained. You know, so Jay Leno is like the only guy who can own these kind of crazy cars because it just takes crazy amounts of money to do it. So I was like, I don't have that kind of money. I wonder if I could just build one from scratch. So it seemed like a really cool project. And I usually start things on like Christmas break and I map everything out. So for Christmas that year, one of my staff, Drew Miles, he gave me this little like steam powered, it's just a little steam engine. It's like a toy, you know, it's like a 1930s toy or whatever. And you put water in it and light a fire under it. It just goes around and makes steam noises. And I was like, okay, shit, I'm totally building a steam car now. Started building it Christmas, made it to about March or April. And I had the boiler set up. It was making steam. I had the engine. It was a twin piston, double acting, Ulfeld style engine. And then I had the chassis kind of ready. And it started looking like this crazy steampunk thing. Like I didn't want it to look steampunk, like have fake copper and brass on it. Everything was 100% real. But just because the function dictated the form, it started looking really crazy steampunk. And then for the throttle, there's no concept of like gas pedal on a steam car. There's you open up a throttle valve and you crack it open and then you leave it at a certain setting in order to go. So I had this kind of like wind up, looked like an egg beater that I got. It was like from the 1930s and it was an egg beater, but I could turn it and then it would move a lever linearly. And so I wanted it to say, to indicate the different throttle openings, I wanted it to say like resting, strenuous, grueling, all the terms from Oregon Trail, because you could set your, I don't know, you guys are too young, but you could set all your speeds of your oxen in Oregon Trail to like strenuous or grueling or whatever. So anyway, I wanted this lettering, this really intricate lettering in like a 1920s script font in metal to go on top of this thing. And I had an indicator needle so that if you turned the dial, the thing would rotate, the lettering would rotate into view, and then it would line up with the indicator needle. So it was really cool. And then so I go to make these letters on my plasma table, and it just melted into a huge ball. And I was like, oh, that's unfortunate. Let me change my consumables. Didn't work. Let me adjust my power settings. Didn't work. I probably tried it 55 times, 60 times. Went through all my scrap metal, went through hundreds of dollars worth of consumables and frustration. And I was like, I just can't do this. I didn't want to give up. I didn't want it plastic. I didn't want it hand painted. I had this vision for it. And again, that's when Drew Miles was like, hey man, my buddy of mine, he works at a laser shop. They can cut that for you. And I was like, BS. There's no way that a laser can cut metal, because the only lasers that I had ever messed with was like a laser pointer. So I was like, how powerful is this thing? This like, DOD level or what are we doing? So he's like, hey, let me talk to my buddy again with a 6-pack of beer. Let me get him to make this off hours. So he made this awesome lettering for me. And the first time that I held that in my hands, I was like, oh, people need access to this. This is magic. It felt like black magic because I didn't have to order 1,000 of them. The accuracy and the finish was, beyond my wildest garage dreams. So yeah, that was the inspiration. Those letters, strenuous, grueling, resting, but that was it.
Oh, that's hilarious.
That's
I
so
do
cool.
actually remember Oregon Trail. I am of that generation. It's a blast from my past. Back when games were on floppy disks and
Totally. Yep.
One thing that I did want to touch on that you said earlier is that you and I imagine a lot of the people at your shop are just car guys through and through. And earlier this week, I was able to chat with one of your head engineers, Jake Holland, and he was saying that some of the projects that you guys produce for your own personal projects here and there, you kind of flip your mindset. Instead of, oh, well, I could make it in these billion ways, you go, I want to make this in sheet metal specifically, which is so fantastic. A big thing that Josh and I do is a lot of the projects that we design are specifically 3D printable, because that's one of the first tools that hobbyists get into, and they go, okay, I have a 3D printer, now I want to design some stuff for it. So a lot of our beginner projects are totally 3D printable. But I was chatting with him a little bit about his personal projects that you guys all do. And one of the things that he was chatting with to me about was you guys made or he said practically we made an entire car out of sheet metal. I was trying to like visualize it, and he just kept on. You could just see how excited he was getting and how stoked he was. And I was like, that's gotta look amazing. Can you please tell us about that?
Yeah, visualize the F-117A stealth fighter,
Oh my God.
and now just make it raw aluminum color. It's just silver. That's basically what this car looks like. So we were exhibiting at the SEMA show in Las Vegas, and it's this huge car show. It's all for aftermarket car parts. And we had a booth, and I'm like, I want something that's gonna like be really cool in the booth, and it's got to be car related. But I don't want a car that has some of our parts. This should be like all of our parts that looks like a car. So he set to work. We sketched it on a whiteboard, and I was like, here's kind of what I'm thinking. And because it was sheet metal, we had these awesome built-in constraints. Like you were touching on, we don't just say, oh, let's just build anything we want. We say, let's build what we can within our constraints. And I think everybody listening to this, when they're in their garage or whatever, you design things based on your capabilities. So,
and I think that's where a lot of creativity comes in from as well.
Oh, 1,000,000%.
You solve problems you didn't think you could solve.
Dude, if you put me in a grocery store and you're like, hey, Jim, pick out what you're going to cook for dinner, I have no idea. There's too many options. I get decision paralysis because my mind is running wild. I'm like, oh God, I could do 100 different things, 1,000 different things. Whereas if you put me in my own pantry, after my wife's been gone for like 2 weeks, I'm like, okay, I have like an onion and a shoelace and a Mr. Coffee. We're going to make some hobo chili. But I love that because the constraints allow me to perform at a different level. Like I just know, okay, this is all I got. I'm going to make it work. So it's the same thing if you're making something in your garage. If you have a 3D printer, everything you design is going to be for 3D printing. If you add a bandsaw, then you're like, okay, I can do 3D printing plus a bandsaw. Okay, how could I do that? If you have a vise, you're like, okay, now I can actually hold stuff and cut it. So every tool that you add kind of levels you up a little bit. So back to the sheet metal car, we're like, okay, it needs to look super cool. So it's the single seat Roadster. It sits about 2.5 inches off the ground. It has these huge wheels on it, almost like a soapbox derby car. It looks like a land speed racer meets stealth fighter meets, Blade Runner. Really, really cool vehicle. And then we decided to just like stretch goal, and we're like, okay, let's make the powertrain insane. So we have a little 10 kilowatt turbine engine from like the most expensive RC plane that you could ever get. And it runs on jet fuel. So the little turbine spins a generator. The generator charges a pack of batteries, and then the actual drive unit, it's like a 20 horsepower electric motor in the back. So we drove it. Actually, Jake cruised it down the Las Vegas Strip after the SEMA show, and it's super cool. But those projects like that, they keep us fresh. Our CTO, Jacob Graham, he is adamant that all of us have to be using the product all the time, and we all have to have side projects. So he's making stuff constantly. We have a local pickup rack, and he goes out there every morning and goes and gets his parts. He's like, he signs everything for local pickup, and that weekend, he's working on his ham radio antenna, or he made a custom inverter for his DeLorean that he converted to electric. There's all of us have these wild projects. And then we also get to use that same engineering skill for internal use as well. So like we do ceramic tumbling in order to soften the edge on some parts. And the ceramic tumbling, you have this media that the machine spits it out near the floor, and then you got to lift it up, and it's heavy, and so then you got to put it back in the machine. It's a pain in the butt. So using our constraints of sheet metal, we're like, hey, let's make this crazy vacuum that sucks up these rocks and then spits them out 6 feet, into the air, and then reloads them so we don't have to bend over all the time. And then we layer that on with, we're only allowed to use what's available to our customers. And so if we need a thickness that we don't stock, it's like, okay, we got to make sure customers have access to this. Or if we need it bent in a way that is not just available on the website, we're like, okay, we either work within that constraint or we make this available to customers. So by eating our own dog food, we're able to make it better and better.
I'm so glad you said that. I had in my notes to ask you about dog fooding, because I think for the entrepreneurs or for the folks maybe who haven't quite made that leap to entrepreneurship but have thought about it quite often, one of the things that I think is the most powerful is actually being a customer of the solution you're trying to provide. And I think you called that dog fooding in a previous podcast. Can you double click on the dog fooding idea?
Yeah. It's I think it's more common in the world of software, but I believe it actually started from the CEO of Alpo, like Alpo Dog Food. And at a board meeting, he opened up a can of dog food and passed it around. It's like, we all have to try this. Like, how come we're not trying our own product? So in the world of software, it means, yeah, you can write code, but are you actually using the end product and seeing where the bugs are and living it as a customer, walking a mile in their shoes? And I think too often today, like you said earlier, people just have an app idea or something, but they're not really the customer. And then you end up with a really crappy product and it's buggy and you don't really understand how bad those bugs are. You don't understand all the friction because you're not really using it. So yeah, to anyone who's listening, who's entrepreneurial minded, you have to be the number one customer. Yeah, just make sure that you're not taking any shortcuts or whatever, because we have millions of dollars of equipment that's all beautiful and you can use it in all kinds of wild ways, but we restrict ourselves to using it as our customers would. And then we quickly realize, we're like, oh wait, I know the machine can do this. We don't allow it on the customer side, but maybe we need to open that up a little bit. And then we end up coming up with new products and stuff too. So it's really cool. It's a great way to continually evolve the product for zero cost.
That's incredible. Yeah, I think you also said something earlier in, maybe it was a different podcast, where not only do you use your own product, but you force your staff to use the product as your customers use the product. So you can't just walk out, if you're an engineer, onto the floor and go, I would like my part, please, Mr. Machine Operator or Mrs. Machine Operator, right? So you can't just go and grab the part. And part of that idea is, coming back to this dog fooding thing, is not just using your own products as an insider, but using it as a customer of the service that you provide. I just think that's such a powerful idea.
Yeah, everyone should do it. Like, if I need a part for something I'm working on at home, I use my credit card. I order it from the website, and then I have it shipped to my house, because I want to see, how long did it really take? The pizza tracker said that it was going to take 2 days, but it actually took 3. Or when the box arrived, the packaging was all damaged. Or God forbid, I opened up the box and there was no candy in it. People freak out if there's no candy in the box.
That was the best bit.
Yeah. So,
good God. Opening that up.
So speaking of Pizza Tracker, Jake, you experienced firsthand the Pizza Tracker. I think that's such a great analogy, because I have in fact ordered pizzas with a Pizza Tracker and gotten excited that my pizza is thrown in the oven. And it's the weirdest experience to me, because it doesn't feel like it should matter all that much. And yet, in the industry that we're a part of here, in this making manufacturing industry, it's completely uncommon to have communication throughout the entire cycle, and then kind of an interest in a giddiness. And Jake, I want to point this at you for a second.
Yes,
can you talk
I can't wait to
about
talk about
the
this.
giddiness that you experienced having ordered parts from SendCutSend? Jake, hit me.
Yes, please. So one of the projects that I've been talking about quite literally for years, one of the long-term projects that I'm sure all of our podcast listeners are sick of me talking about, is one of my lifelong projects that I wanted to make is a 1-to-1 scale R2D2, which is, an unbelievably huge project. Like, people have no idea how many thousands of custom pieces there are to R2D2. It's ridiculous. And I'm a bit of a purist when it comes to prop replication, so it's like, well, R2D2's metal. He doesn't have a wooden core. He's not plastic that's cladded in metal. He is entirely metal, so I need to make him out of metal. He has battery boxes on his legs. Well, that's where the batteries need to go, you know? So everything that goes into it, I'm like unbelievably anal obsessive. So years ago, I started to design the CAD model and do all the research that goes into it. And it took me years to finally figure it out. And it just kind of lived in, the background of all my files of, I'll get to it Sunday. A lot of R2D2 builders, they say, oh, it'll take between 5 and 25 years to fully get it to your personal spec, which is kind of beautiful. And I was kind of comfortable with that, going, yeah, I'll make it someday. And then this kind of business relationship coming around, I was just scanning through all my files, and it was like, oh my God, I can finally start to build him. And so chatting with some of your staff beforehand, they said, hey, before Jim comes on the pod, order a couple parts. I'm like, okay, I've already got 100 ready to go right now, but I'll do a smattering of different thicknesses and different materials. And after ordering it, after literally clicking go and getting a text and an email saying, hey, not only have we received it, and then maybe 30 minutes later, your order's in production, I was starting to get this childlike giddiness. I call it the fizz, where it's just like you have this like high frequency internal buzz about you. Oh, I'm getting a new tool. Oh, I just figured out how to make this project. I just woke up and I figured out, oh, I need to make it in this way. And after getting my first part for my R2D2, the shoulder bracket, and just kind of holding it, not only going through the whole process, but actually holding it in my hand and going, oh my God, it's real. Just dusting over it, the quality is immaculate. The accuracy after going through it with a pair of calipers is perfect. It like all of that put to the side, the actual enjoyment of going through, I'm gonna check out the material, the size, the deburring, I don't need any powder coating, I don't need this, and then actually seeing, hey, it's being made, it's being delivered, and then having it arrived, it is childlike joy. And I don't say that to give you a massive ego. It is genuinely, for the first time in a long time, me feeling this childlike energy with it. And then opening up and, all of the parts are beautifully organized and they're all wrapped in plastic and they're all perfect. And just like being so giddy and then seeing a little sour Twizzler in there. Just like, I couldn't have been more giddy. I was with my fiance when I was opening it up, and she was just like, had a massive smile about me having an even bigger smile. So it was just lovely. It was absolutely lovely.
It's pretty cool to, have this idea in your head or on paper or in CAD and then actually hold it. And that first time you hold it, you're like, oh crap, this is possible. This is super cool. And the reason that we have the pizza tracker is to kind of peel back the curtain and show what's happening, because it simulates that sense of making it in your garage. You're like, okay, I'm going to go out to the garage. I'm going to turn on the lights. I'm going to fire up the machine. I'm going to load the material. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to make the material. I'm going to load it again. Oh, crap, I'm out of material, whatever. That is all. It's part of the maker experience. It's understanding all the steps. It's learning at each step. And the pizza tracker is a great way for us to do that so that people can actually see, oh, okay, I understand that it does take a little bit longer in bending because bending is a more complex operation, or powder coating is going to take an extra day. It's probably because they got to put it in an oven or whatever. But it helps set expectations. And then it's also this learning thing where people can have that little bit of knowledge that they gain on every order, and it helps them with future orders. It helps them schedule. It helps them, anticipate what their workflow is going to be like, et cetera. So yeah, the pizza tracker is really fun. I love it. Like, all of our guys love it too, because I'm just as excited as our customers when I need to do something. If I need a little bracket for my shower, I'm watching the pizza tracker constantly on my phone. I'm like, okay, where is it? Where is it? Is it on the FedEx truck, heading to my house so that I can get my shower fixed or whatever. So Anyway, yeah, thanks. I'm glad it works. We want to do more of that too. We want to expand on the visibility that we're giving our customers. At one point, we were taking pictures of the parts throughout the process as they go across certain stages of our conveyor lines. Then we ran into issues with like ITAR and DoD customers, and like you shouldn't take pictures of some parts.
Yeah, I was going to say, I bet the security is a big bet as well.
Yeah, it was a little funny. There's still that potential in the future, just the way that we break orders apart now. Someone could opt in and actually see what their part is going to look like. And we're doing that for two reasons. One is to build the fizz. I'm going to use that from now on. I like the fizz. To build that excitement. But then also it gives us an opportunity for the customer to reach out and be like, oh, wait, shoot, that's, I gave you the wrong revision. I just saw on the pizza tracker that you cut this, but it's wrong. Or, hey, can I change my powder coat color, before it goes there or something like that. We're getting there because we want to simulate as closely as possible that experience of walking in with a 6-pack of beer and making a part in an evening. And if we can show you what we're doing and tell you what we're doing in real time, that gets us pretty close.
I was giddy. I didn't even order the part, and I saw the pizza tracker and I thought, yes, please. I would like this. I'm like watching the part be delivered. So it's amazing to me to see that not only is the person who ordered the part excited, but even peripherally, it's just fun to kind of see it go down the line. And so I think one of the things that we say to our audience that we're constantly trying to help people understand is that if you learn CAD, you've learned the language of communication with people and machines of 3D objects. So you're learning this skill where you say, hey, look, see, I have a thing that I can make. I think we've all had experiences where somebody's walked up to us and tried to describe using words what a product they're making is going to look like. And it is just the most hilarious game of charades. And it's completely impossible to imagine what somebody else has in their brain. So part of what we're doing is we're teaching people the language of 3D communication. And the big part of it that we've had in our heads for a long time, but has been difficult to solve in some ways, has been not only can you show those ideas to people, but now you can actually collaborate with machines all over the world. And there's probably, I'm just guessing here, but there's probably $1 trillion worth of machines that you have the ability now to communicate with. And SendCutSend is playing that role of not only can you collaborate with your machine that's a 3D printer that more and more people are having at home, but now you can collaborate with $1 million machine, a $10 million machine, with folks in the industry that kind of help guide and mentor you along the way. You don't have to spend all this money on this capital equipment. If you want to build a rocket and send it to the moon, it is literally possible. Not a dream, not an imagination, but it is something that you could imagine doing. So can you just double click on the role that CAD plays in this process for you all, and then maybe give our audience some advice about how they may grab the first part from SendCutSend that would be exciting to get, maybe something that they made in a CAD software.
Yeah, the CAD is one of those things where we encourage people to learn it and use it, whether they use us or not, because I'm with you guys. I believe that it's such an unlock. Sometimes I'll equate it to welding. So if you're working on a project and you don't know how to weld, then that's your constraint, and you're going to be limited to what you can and can't do. But as soon as you learn to weld, you're like, oh, okay, I can level up now. I can do all kinds of crazy stuff that I couldn't do before. Or let's say I learned to code. I'm like, oh man, now I can like make a little app to track my project or who knows what. CAD is in that same bracket. Once you can do CAD, you go from the guy who has an idea for an app to the guy who can actually make an app. And CAD allows you to do that. Like you said, it's not only a way to communicate your design intent to others, but you can shortcut it directly to machines and manufacturing. So the more that you learn CAD and the more you understand, more importantly, is DFM, design for manufacturability, is absolutely critical. It has to go hand in hand with CAD, because the CAD software is so damn good today that you can design anything you want, and who knows if it can actually be made. 3D printing, yeah, you can make a lot of stuff. But when it comes to other materials, you have to be really careful. And that's probably the number one issue that we run into is people who are endlessly creative and they have great ideas, but it ends up not being manufacturable for one reason or another, especially in like sheet metal bending. The way that sheet metal bending works is you have a punch and a die, and they come together in order to bend the sheet metal into a form. But this punch and die are held in the equipment, and the equipment exists. So if you have a shape that's going to be bent and then it like folds in onto itself, or you just can't reach in there. So we're constantly educating people about how the process actually works, what the machines look like, what the machine limitations are. So our best customers are the ones that not only are good at CAD, but they understand the process. And whether that's just like watching manufacturing videos on YouTube or, seeing a machine work at a makerspace or whatever, I would rather have someone who understands the manufacturing side and is worse at CAD than some guy who knows every single button in CAD but has never touched a machine. So I think it's a good mix. Make sure that you understand both, and then you're some sort of super weapon. So the thing that I recommend to people is, as far as getting their first part made, just start super simple. Get that win under your belt. Start with, I don't know, a plate or a bracket or something like that, and upload it. We do some automatic DFM checks, but if we miss something, our team will reach out to you and be like, hey, it looks like your flange was just a little too short. It's not going to fit in the bottom punch for this reason. Here's actually what it looks like. Would you like to make a revision, or do you want us to do it for you? And it's that building of that long-term relationship. We start at ground zero with a really simple part, and then over the course of time, you start to see people doing more and more crazy complex stuff. And we have customers that push the limits of our product in ways that we couldn't imagine. And it's just because they're thinking about it nonstop, and they're getting more and more clever about working within our constraints. And it's really cool because we have these parts that you're like, I can't believe we made that. And then you look and see how it was done. I'm like, oh my God, this customer was brilliant. Like, not only was the CAD good, but they really understood our manufacturing side. So I think for manufacturers to be successful in the future, not just SendCutSend, for everyone, we have to show behind the scenes. We have to actually show stuff getting made and how it works. And if you understand CAD and then you watch how the machine works, you're like, oh, that's why I can't bend it to this angle, or that's why they can't put this piece of hardware in this particular location. It's because I can see how the equipment would collide or whatever. So the better that we can do on that, the more everyone will be successful.
You just made me realize something, and we're nearing the end here. So I want to say something quick. We'll ask you a couple of rapid fire questions, and then we'll wrap up the pod. But you made me realize something about your service that I don't think is intuitive for folks who are going to be using it. And that is, you're in part an education company. You are in part of that process. And one of the things that I think our audience can really get from this is it almost doesn't matter what you order. Having ordered that first part is a part of your education. It's not a separate entity. And by ordering that part, now you have contact with some engineers. You have this back and forth about machines. Even if you know nothing whatsoever, your part fails, you're told it's wrong. That in itself is part of that learning. It's that, how many mistakes can you make? How quickly can you make them? You show me the person who's made the most mistakes, and I'll show you the smartest guy in the room. That's kind of the idea behind it. So,
yeah.
But let's hit you with some rapid fire questions here, if you don't mind, and then we'll call it a day. Let's go ahead, Jake.
So this is a section of all these interviews that we want to do. Effectively, we're going to be interviewing people within our community, within our universe, people who are into business, but also the manufacturing, but also have the kind of maker instinct that's kind of fundamental to their DNA. So if you remember, there was a very old show called Inside the Actor Studios, where effectively one of the best interviewers of all time would ask every single actor the same questions. And they weren't about acting, they were a little bit about everything. So what is your favorite smell? Things like that. So I would just wanted to ask you 5 very quick questions with more of a makery bend to it. If you want to answer them in 1 question or less. I'm looking for quickness on your feet.
Okay.
What is the first physical thing you ever sold that you made?
These are supposed to be super short answers?
Oh, yeah.
I drew naked ladies inside of origami balloons, like in 3rd grade, and I sold them for money on the playground.
That is
That
absolutely
is the most
hysterical.
incredible answer.
That's amazing. You just reminded me one of the first things I ever did. I used to make South Park characters that I would cut out of construction paper and I would sell them for $1
Yep.
on the schoolyard. That's amazing, dude. All right, number 2. What is one tool that you cannot live without?
I would say my MacBook Air. It's a hell of a tool, but man, it gives you access to communication, to CAD. It gives you access to manufacturing, gives you access to the entire world. With a good laptop, you can do anything you want.
I love that. And number 3, what is the biggest lesson that you've learned from a failure?
Oh, I love failures. They make you stronger. I made all kinds of failures, and I'm not dead yet. So it's taught me just to keep persevering. I know that I won't make that failure again. So yeah, like you said, show me the guy with the most failures, and I'll show you the smartest guy in the room.
This is a really interesting one that I kind of want to pose to both you and Josh. If you could only work with one material or one medium for the rest of your life, what would it be?
5052 series aluminum in 3mm thickness or 0.125 inch thickness. It is the
Beautiful.
best. You can do everything with it.
Mine would be wood. I just enjoy the process of woodworking, and I didn't enjoy it when I have tried to turn it into a job and tried to turn it into an actual career, but found that I just enjoy wood grain and species of trees and hardnesses and thicknesses, and I just thoroughly enjoy the process of woodworking.
Beautiful. I think black walnut for me. It's one of those things that's just kind of sprawled into every single thing that I make. Last one. What is the best business advice that you've received from a mentor?
Focus on the product. And that was given to me by Ben Chestnut, who was the CEO and founder of MailChimp. And a long time ago, our software company had an integration with MailChimp, and I flew out to Georgia to go see him. And I was like, you guys are so big, you're growing so fast. This is so amazing. What are you doing with your advertising? What are you doing with your marketing? How are you hiring? How are you doing all this stuff? And he goes, Jim, just focus on the product. Just have a good product. Everything else falls in line. And I would encourage everyone else to use that same advice.
That's absolutely fantastic, man. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much. That's going to conclude. This has been the CADclass podcast. I'm Josh.
I'm Jake.
And I'm Jim. Yeah.
And you can find you can find information about SendCutSend at SendCutSend.com. We encourage you all to order a part, and we'll see you on the next pod. Thanks so much, everybody.